All right. Hello and welcome again to White Lotus of Light, Friday night with White Lotus of Light. I'm just going to wait a minute here for a few more folks to kind of join the stream. And once we get around 10 folks, then we'll, oh, well, we instantly got 10. So there we go. That makes it easy enough. So go ahead and say hi in the chat if you want to get a shout out. And I will just say, hey, everyone, Q&A in the second half. And then all super stickers and super chats will be answered. So I really need to be off here in about 2 hours. So I'm going to try and keep things tight. Since we got 10 people, I'm going to go ahead and, oh, man, I missed it. That's what she said moment. So yeah, I think I'm just going to leap right into it. Good to see everyone. I see Juju Bear. I see Clint. I don't know if Daniel, Zach Smith is in there. Anyone who wants a shout out here at the beginning, I can say a couple of shout outs. Thank you so much, Clint. Nice. A Bakester Wrap. I like that. That's awesome. Great name. Oh, here, I'll put people up real quick. So Juju Bear said they could see the description. Really nice comment. Thank you, Zach. That's the name Dana goes by. Clint, Bakester Wrap. Oh, hey, what's up, Alex? Good to see you, brother. Like for real. And hey, Clint, are you in the kind of online former angelic magic student sort of chat server, whatever it is? If not, you should definitely join. Love to have you there. All right, so let's just go ahead and get into it. So let me put that up. Boom. Yeah, so we're going to start out here with, I talk often on this channel. If you're new to this channel, I really recommend you watch the Shadow Wars series. So you can learn about this concept of this shadow war that's going on between two groups of elite who are both, well, one of them's pure evil and the other one's not exactly nice guys. And the pure evil group I refer to as the Molochians, and the group that's by far the more reasonable of the two, but still quite vicious and aggressive, I call the Luciferians. And so if you're not familiar with those concepts, I highly recommend you go and watch that Shadow Wars Luciferians versus Molochians, because I think you will find that if you use that frame to examine world events, suddenly things make quite a lot more sense. I'm always forgetting not to look in the camera. I look at the chat area. So anyways, yeah, if you're not familiar with that, you should definitely bone up on that in order to really understand what's going on. But of course, you're welcome to watch it anyway. So I've been realizing, I've been for quite some time saying that the Luciferians are using a strategy akin to what Muhammad Ali, the boxing great, used to do. That was called the rope-a-dope strategy, where he would just basically defend himself and eventually get pushed back into the ropes, and then it would get broken up by the ref, and he would just defend himself, and then the other guy would just attack him, and he get driven back to the ropes, and he called it rope-a-dope. And what would eventually happen is, like in the 9th or 10th round, the other guy would start to get tired from having attempted to attack Muhammad Ali for all those rounds. This is when Muhammad Ali was older. And then he would just, having saved his energy, hit the other guy just super freaking hard and knock him out in like the 8th or 10th round. And Muhammad Ali called that rope-a-dope. So a similar strategy is being employed by the Luciferians, but they're using the Hermetic Principle of the pendulum. So I talk often in my angelic magic classes how the universe is mental in nature, and that's the Hermetic Principle of mentalism. And one of the ways that the universe operates, in addition to being mental in nature, is that it has this pendulum effect. The way it's described in the Emerald Tablet is that the measure to the left equals the measure to the right. And so what I believe the Luciferians are doing is they're letting the Molochians run amok for the first time ever without the Luciferians there to restrain them. They're letting the Molochians run amok. And that's why they're doing things like eat the bugs, let's have twerking, twerking men in dresses in schools. Let's have, like white erasure, like with the Gemini AI thing that just happened out, erasing men in the, so-called MCU instead of MCU, Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's the she, as in she, her, you, and the race swapping that's going in Hollywood. I just saw this article that's so insane that actually I'm going to just share that with people here in just a second. I need to real quick bring it up, which is always treasure. This is just, it's just insane on the face of it. And more people who support the left are starting to see that. And so it says, trans women's milk is good as breast milk, British health officials say. And they're saying that the breast milk produced by men, which is really just some kind of discharge from the extreme amount of hormone cocktail they're on, they're trying to claim that it has the same amount of nutrition as, as mother's milk. I mean, need I say more? Like, that's insane. Like, you can support trans people's rights or that trans people exist, which actually I support both of those things. There's a big difference between that and trying to push it on children who can't consent to get a credit card or sex or join the military, but somehow they can consent to permanent life-altering change. That I'm against. But of course, trans people should have rights. And if an adult decides they want to transition, I guess that's up to them. And they have to live with the consequences of that, which might be positive for them. But to try and say that the excretions of males on a cocktail of hormones, biological males on a cocktail of hormones, that the discharge they have from the male breast milk is the same as female breast milk is just, first of all, it just makes me go, ew. It just has a natural, like, ew, like, so gross. And that's because some basic part of me knows that that's just an absolute abomination and against nature. And you see this everywhere, eating the bugs, frickin', Bill Gates wanting to have people drink toilet water. And what I believe that the elves are doing is they're in the Molochians here saying, yeah, you should go for it. Back when we used to tell you to restrain yourselves, don't restrain yourselves. You've got it in the bag. You got the CDBCs are about to come out. You got the WHO. You got your 2020 pandemic, all that stuff coming through, right? And we won't talk about the B word tonight. You got all that stuff happening. And how could you possibly lose? Well, one way you could lose is to lose in the master narrative and set up a situation where you look completely justified in doing a coup d'etat against a completely insane, rapacious, horrific, nightmare global elite that I refer to as the Molochians. In order to be able to do that, one of the main things you have to do is you have to win popular public support. And another thing that occurred to me recently is I was listening to Alex Jones, and I was absolutely astonished because the prophecy that the Virtues gave to me this past Christmas, 2023 Christmas, about the year 2024, eerily paralleled what Alex Jones is now predicting. Essentially, a Trump dominating win, which I've actually been saying that for a year that I thought he was going to win. When I had, again, the Virtues showed me an image, or maybe it's even 2 years ago now. I think it was a year ago, though. I think it was a year ago. And I saw Trump on a snake going through a swamp. And then he said, the worm will turn. And then he and the snake both turned to look at me. And he said, it always does. And then he went further in there, further into this swamp that he was traversing. And so Alex Jones is saying that Trump's going to win and dominate, which I think is fait accompli at this point. The other thing they've done that's pissed off a lot of people is immigration has the illegal immigration thing has woken up a lot of people, including strongholds of the Democratic Party, such as like Chicago and New York black people who are now like, whoa, about all this immigration coming in, especially when they see these people handed $10,000 prepaid credit cards and being given free health care. A beautiful friend of mine, her grandfather fell and broke his pelvis, and he's in Manhattan, and he can't even be seen by doctors because the ERs are overrun with immigrants who, by the way, are getting free health care in addition to 10K prepaid credit cards. That's mind-boggling. And so people like Stephen A. Smith and 50 Cent are like, whoa, like what's going on here? That's not okay. And they're saying, and even Stephen A. Smith from ESPN, who's black, which is relevant here, and he hated Trump. He went off on Trump and Trump's entire administration, like proudly voted for Biden in 2020, all that stuff. He should have said Trump was right about a lot of things, and people missed the Trump era because things were so much cheaper back then. And you didn't have this thing where now they're giving away billions of dollars or tens of millions. I forget what it was, the exact figure, but it was quite a large amount of money to these illegal immigrants that have been brought from the border states up to New York, which that was a stroke of genius and tip of the hat to Abbott and the other governors who started doing that. So Jones said, not only do the Democrats know they're going to win, they're hinting, and he showed a clip of Hillary Clinton kind of hinting at this and other people hinting at this, but they're hinting that they might have to do a counter, or they might have to do a coup against Trump, that they might just have to do just anything to prevent Trump from winning. And they're already planting legislative landmines for Trump, like a thing where if he tries to leave NATO or not fund the Ukraine war, I think was the other one, but especially the NATO thing, that would trigger an automatic impeachment or something insane like that. I forget what it was exactly, and pardon me for forgetting the details, but they're already trying to like bind Trump as though they know he's going to win, probably because he's landsliding like to a level that we haven't seen since frickin' Eisenhower, right? Or Reagan's turn when Reagan won against Mondale is probably the last time in modern history where there's these kind of margins they're seeing, right? Like blowing away Obama's wins. So he said that now they're preparing to like basically do a false flag and or terrorist attacks after the election, between that period of time when Trump wins the election and then when he would take office, January 21st. And I'm pretty sure I say that in that angelic magic prophecy. They definitely said that to me. They also said part of how that will happen is that when they release these groups that Alex Jones is pointing to that would do these uprisings, like I think it's going to be the immigrants this time, right? And I think that's part of why they're getting those $10,000 debit cards, is I think some of that is to go to cells, right? Who will then try and get people to riot and burn the cities down, so that way they can try and declare martial law to try and prevent Trump from taking office. Exactly what they accused Trump of with Jan 6, right? But this time for real though, with the military, right? That's what I think their plan is. And what I think is, again, the pendulum, that would be the ultimate pendulum push, right? That would be the ultimate pendulum push if Biden and the Democrats attempted to do a coup after Trump had won the election in 2024. That would be the ultimate pendulum push, which would then cause a certain reaction in the other direction. And I think that that's one example of where my brother, who like forever disagrees with me about this sort of thing, to put it very mildly, I think that's the kind of thing that even he would have a hard time as a super Trump derangement syndrome poster boy. I think he would have a really hard time ignoring that, this coup had occurred, right? So then when the counter coup takes place, because guess what? Guess who's really in control of the military? All the important aspects of the military, right? Doing a counter coup to stop a coup that is fairly well publicized, maybe even giving it a day or two where it was obvious that the other guys, or even a bit longer, that the other guys had done a coup, would be a huge, huge, huge underpinning for Trump to then be able to go around and arrest all the traitors. It would be a way easier sell. The right wing's already sold on it. So who you have to really sell is the middle and some amount of the Democrats. Of course, there's 20% of the population that it literally does not matter. They could roll out a Moloch statue on the stage at DNC and live sacrifice people. And a certain amount of Democrats would go, it's still better than Trump. They really would. And so I'm not talking about those people. Those people are irretrievably lost. I'm talking about the vast silent center who's watching all this madness go on and is like, whoa, this is insane. And so if there was then a coup by the Biden administration followed by a counter coup by the Patriots, and then they take over, it'd be super easy to sell that these people need to be arrested. In fact, it might be the only way that they could sell that those people need to be arrested, that the vast majority of the country go along with it, and it doesn't look like the way my brother described it to me, like, oh no, he's going to do a night of long knives. Like, they're clearly in a huge panic because Trump's basically said day one, I'm going to arrest you guys. And they seem to believe him this time. And they seem to be really scared. Hillary Clinton seemed really quite nervous in this interview that Alex Jones had. And so that's sort of my section on the shadow war, is that's what I think is going to unfold, more or less, is something along those lines. There will be terrorist attacks and mass, maybe rioting by immigrants and perhaps BOM and other things like that, to where it will look like it's an organic, and like Antifa, it'll look like it's an organic response on the left, that then Biden will say, oh, well, we need to do Insurrection Act, right? Like H.W. Bush did. So funny, projection, right? And then they would try to, under the cover of that, go around and arrest Trump and the other people. I could even see a scenario where Trump was arrested. He allowed himself to be arrested. And then there was a counter coup and Trump came out of it. That would be like, from a narrative perspective, can you imagine anything that would be more powerful than a coup followed by a counter coup in terms of justifying then Trump to go around and arrest these people? I cannot, especially if Trump then ties it to WEF, et cetera, which he would, right? And of course, backing Trump are the Luciferian, probably Florentine families, the Luciferian families among the black nobility, essentially, and certain other high-level power players. So that's the Shadow War segment. Then I want to talk a little bit, I'm going to talk about the Templar here at the end. I'm going to talk about the anti-natalist psyops. I just think that this really, 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 really is worthy of consideration. One of the main goals, if you haven't noticed, is Depop, right? And we won't go into the very obvious example around that, because last time I was sloppy about that, I got a warning, right? So you guys know what I'm talking about. So one of the ways to achieve that, of course, you also see this with like the trans thing, because those people become sterilized with the thing that just happened in, the past few years. A lot of people are saying that the people who received it are now sterile, right? So another way they're doing it is by really driving a wedge between men and women, and they're driving women into either dark feminine, the OnlyFans girl model, or dark masculine, like a throat-slitting backstabber climbing the corporate ladder, like Ally McBeal style, usually with like some kind of unhinged sex life as well, kind of like Ann Coulter, right? It's kind of a good example of this. She's a right-wing version of this, but you see it actually primarily on the left. But she's a perfect example of what I'm talking about, this throat-slitting, backstabbing ruthlessness combined with extreme promiscuity. And you see it with both the dark masculine and dark feminine when women are shoved into that role. Notice the divine feminine is suppressed. The power of the divine feminine, the receptivity and power of that, the alignment with the moon, right? So it's also happening with men. Men are being pushed into the dark feminine, which is the beta male misogynist kind of cuck guy that you see on the left, like Destiny, where his wife is, they have an open relationship, and that's fine. Consenting adults, it's fine. But the way in which his wife behaves and the way in which you can see the impact on him, I don't care what he says, is like really sad. And it puts him in a dark feminine role. And he's very passive aggressive. And it's the kind of men that don't just express interest in a woman, they sidle up next to the woman. It's exactly what I did. Being harmed by dark masculine, I thought the choices were dark masculine or dark feminine, because this has been kind of the standard for a long, long time, really. Although there was more allowance for divine feminine and divine masculine in the 80s and before. Like it really started to change in the 90s, and then it's gone into hyperdrive the past 20 years. And they're trying to drive us apart in addition to silo us into either dark masculine, like the player guy, the Andrew Tate, right? Or dark feminine, like the weak leftist male whose girlfriend goes, and Ryan Long does a whole bit about it, where like his girlfriend, he pays for his girlfriend or wife to have a house where she has sex with the guy for her OnlyFans channel that he controls. And then he like pays for their dinner and stuff. And like, he's talking about how he's super secure in his masculinity because of this toxic stuff that's being put on the left of like, it should be fine if like your girlfriend disappears for 3 weeks at Vegas and doesn't call you, right? And doesn't have any contact with you, right? And again, consenting adults can do what they want, but I'm talking about like just really egregious behavior that's a woman behaving in the dark feminine, dark masculine, right? So one of the things that has happened in the past 20 years is that there's been, and it's really been much longer than this, it's been in the negative aspects of feminism. And I want to be clear, I totally think women are the most amazing thing ever. I like women, generally speaking, quite often better than men. And I think that in many ways, women are just better than men. And there's stuff that men are better than women at. And that's the beauty. That's the beauty. That's the interplay. We're different. And that's good. That's the way it should be. It's what drives the universe, the masculine and the feminine energy. And so one of the things that's really changed, really ever since feminism, is targeting of women ever ramping up. And in the past 10 to 15 years, with social engineering, around the time of the Obama administration, they really decided to target women more than men because they realized that using weaponized empathy and discussions of empowerment, which are not empowerment at all, but is self-exploitation and self-denial, right? Like, I totally support a lot of women do OnlyFans, and if any of the fans of this show, fans of this show, I don't think that there's necessarily anything wrong with it as long as you're just aware of like what you're doing, and that what you're doing is making money. It's not somehow noble. Like, that's where I would argue. It's okay. It's like honest work. There's plenty of work people do to make money that is in some way not super positive, right? I would say the vast majority of jobs out there are this way. Even my job as a social worker was that way. I felt like I was giving people fish rather than teaching them to fish, and in a way subtly holding them down. So I'm not trying to say I'm like, perhaps what I do now isn't that way, but what I did for the vast majority of my adult life was that way. So I'm not trying to shame people, but I am also trying to say, let's just be real. You're exploiting your own body and looks to gain money. And if you're okay with that, and you're okay with that as forever, then hey, that's fine. That's a choice that you're making. And there's a lot of money to be made there for sure. And maybe you're going to do something noble with that afterwards. And that's fantastic. But to label it as empowerment, other than the empowerment of getting straight cash at any cost, which is a form of empowerment, right? Is just not accurate, meaning that it's not somehow making you noble. and there's been a real push targeting women to say that kind of behavior is somehow noble, like getting it back for women or something like that. And the other one is weaponized empathy. And you see this like in the feminists who are supporting trans women dominating female sports and entering into female safe spaces that have been traditionally, for like all of human history, a female safe space. Like all cultures have female safe spaces. You just have to. It's just people who have penises are the way that some of us are. And you can't let that group mix with women when they're in intimate situations, unless like that woman consents to that and wants that, in which case, great, do whatever you want in whatever order you want. But letting them intrude on those spaces is like against their own interest. But they've used weaponized empathy to do this. And they've used weaponized empathy to get women primarily to go along with the left in this country. The vast majority of the left in America and Europe are women. And it's because women have been targeted with weaponized empathy and with psychological warfare that were thought up in think tanks, and it's hundreds of billions of dollars. And then they target men in reaction to that. And you have the whole red pill movement, and you have pornography for men, and you have increasing pushes of even social engineering within pornography, trying to mainstream trans women porn, trying to mainstream and really push cuckolding porn, and porn where men are disempowered and weakened and like emasculated, really pushing that kind of porn as though, that had like such huge, broad desirability prior to this like force feeding. And just the way that even straight porn massively disempowers men. And I say this as someone who's a recovering, I guess you say you're recovering forever. I haven't looked at it in years, but hardcore or pornography was an addiction I had and that I overcame with the help of the angels. And I'm incredibly grateful for that. And then they also have the red pilling and men going their own way. And, like the whatever podcast, and I forget what that douchey black dude's name is who has his clone of the whatever podcast, where they basically bring on OnlyFans women, a lot of whom just scream that they have self-esteem issues and were abused when they were young, and that they're just desperate to be loved and accepted. And these men like make fun of these women and shame them and kind of like slut shame them. And like it's a huge big thing. And then those guys put up thumbnails of these OnlyFans women like wearing bikinis or whatever in order to drive clicks. And then the men are pulled in by the image of the woman. And then they have like their 2 minutes hate, except for it's 3 hours streamed of hating on these women and trying to make them look dumb. Right. And they've had statistics where with dating apps, it's 10% of men are getting 85% of the right swipes from women. Turns out women are actually more looks oriented than men, especially when they're encouraged to behave in this way with things like the six-pack abs, 6 feet, and 6 figures, or else this guy's not getting any play. You go for it, girl. And they make fun of that on the whatever podcast, but they don't do it in a way that's they then use it to reinforce men hating women and feeling that women are just gold diggers and whores, right? And then women are empowered to like just treat men like shit and you get yours and boss babe and you don't need a man and all this kind of stuff, right? Which if a woman doesn't want to have a man in her life, that's great. But there's a big difference between that and like this forced social engineering that's been doing. And it's been built to drive men and women apart. And it damages both of us, right? The women who are on OnlyFans are being damaged by doing that to some degree, right? Whether they're aware of it or not, like there's some amount of damage that's happening. They're including as yet to be unseen damage of maybe you're getting a job in your mid-30s and they go, care to explain this? And they turn around one of your OnlyFans videos. It's forever the internet, right? And a lot of these women are making this decision when they're very young, and so that is like causing some amount of harm. And then there's the men who watch the OnlyFans and they're these weak little simps and they're emasculated. And then they feel like they can't get a real woman. And there might be some truth to that because they fail to try to improve themselves. But then society tells women, oh, just go for this hyper rarefied air men. And in the meantime, just sleep around a ton with men that are in that top 10% of attractiveness, who hit the gym all the time, all that kind of stuff. Speaking of which, I need to go back to the gym. There's nothing wrong with being healthy and working out, and then therefore you get more attention. It's true whether you're a man or woman. If you work out and are healthy, you're going to get more attention. So they're doing everything they can to divide us, both men and women. Of course, they're doing it along racial lines, right? All this white erasure shit that Gemini AI, the big blow up that happened this week where like Gemini AI from Google was like basically erasing white people from history. And also you could type in show a strong black man and there'd be all instantly as many as you wanted that. And you say show a strong white man and say, oh, this could reinforce harmful stereotypes, blah, blah. Show a happy black couple, show a happy Asian couple. And then they'd say show a happy white couple. Oh, this would be harmful stereotypes, blah, blah. And then you'd say, show Revolutionary War revolutionaries. And then have like an Asian woman general, which I don't think the Asian female, I bet there was not even one in the Revolutionary War. Like I bet there wasn't even one Asian woman in the Revolutionary War. If there was, I'd be happy to be corrected and that would be funny. But if it's one, there literally was only one, maybe, you know what I mean? And like, they had black women and they had like a Native American in full headdress, which even that kind of looked low-key racist, which all the shit is racist. I'm trying to divide Black Americans from white Americans and Latino Americans from white Americans, etc. And there's this awesome group that I highly recommend just for the spectacle of it on Instagram called Latinos or Trump Latinos. And they're like a rap group, and they rap often with black guys talking about how like we were lied to about Trump. Trump actually likes people of color, and like they're very patriotic, and they're like, hey, we need to take care of American citizens first, and like we need to make America great again, all that kind of stuff. And they have like face tattoos and shit. Like they do not look like what you would consider a core and fervent Trump constituency, which is part of how I know that Trump is going to landslide. No amount of cheating is going to be able to bring it through for the Democrats. Plus, they're being watched a lot more. So I think they have kind of settled into that they're going to try and do some kind of shenanigans to keep him out of power. So that's the anti-natalist psyops, because it ends up being like, along with single income no kids or dual income no kids, sinks and dinks, right? Which that's been really empowered, don't have kids. It ends up that we don't have children. And that by not having children, we're having like insane collapsing demographics that are actually kind of dangerous, right? We'll see what future technology can do to sort of counterbalance that huge demographic drop off. It's perhaps robots and AI can fix that. And maybe the Luciferians are planning on that. I do know the Luciferians do not want to have a super narrowed population. They want to have billions of us and a global civilization when they take over. All right, so last section before Q&A, and then we'll take a brief break between the first half and the second half. And then we'll do the Q&A as the Templar. So you can go back on this channel and you can watch my conversations with Timothy Hogan. And actually in my first conversation with him, I was fortunate enough, I believe it was in my first, maybe it was in the second, but I was able to have a world-breaking first that had never been revealed outside of the Templar. And that was that Lewis and Clark, right, from the Lewis and Clark expedition, were secretly Templar, as was Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson, and that Jefferson sent Lewis and Clark not just to go check out the new purchase of lands that he had done, the Louisiana purchase, I'm pretty sure, but also to check on these hidden Templar vaults that had been hidden in the U.S. since before and especially after the Templar suppression in the early 1300s. And they had come over here, and the Native American people that they had found, these certain tribes, they knew basically Masonic handshakes, more or less, slight variations on that perhaps, because those are actually Atlantean grips that go back to Atlantis. And so in certain tribes along the east coast of the Americas and in the center of the Americas, there was the recognition of, oh, if you gave the chief that grip, or the medicine man perhaps, he would recognize that grip and he would know, oh, these are the people who are coming here to check on the vaults that we said that we would vouchsafe and keep secret. And there must have been like elaborate, conversations in order to the Templars to get that accord. And according to Timothy Hogan, they went to check on those vaults. So in 2019, I went to a Templar gathering in Colorado, and Timothy Hogan told us all the stuff that now is public. But when he told us, it was one of the only things I've ever been asked to keep private and to not share with anybody. And so that's why it was a world first when I shared what I just shared about the vaults. But he's gone way beyond that, because I knew other stuff about those vaults that now they're going public with. And what's interesting is we were told in 2019 this stuff would be revealed in 2020. And then suddenly events changed, as you might imagine. And so we were told that we weren't to speak of this publicly, right? And I kept that. I kept my word on that. And I got his permission to talk about those vaults. Well, he's now on Gaia, like dropping insane knowledge. And in fact, the Y Files, which is a huge channel with like 4 million subscribers or 3.38 million, something insane, right? They actually use clips from my show talking about Timothy Hogan. Sadly, I actually got written back by AJ, but unfortunately he put up a link. He put it after the fact when I asked him to put up a link to the channel. He said, sure. And he's like, there it is. And he goes, that was a great interview, by the way. So I guess AJ from Y-Files watched this show at least once, probably just to research Tim Hogan. I mean, it's Tim Hogan, not me, but still, it's cool, right? And he wrote me back and he put it up in the link, but unfortunately it was after it had 2.5 million views, and it like has barely ticked up in the past few days. So oof, that's a bummer. But in that, he goes over a lot of what's been revealed on Gaia. And so this is, if you haven't heard this, this is like, buckle up, because this is crazy AF. So he said the Templar went to the Temple Mount, and I've heard this before. I'd heard this from a rabbi a long time ago, although he claimed this had happened in modern times. And if it happened in modern times, then either the Templar missed one or they planted one there. But I met a rabbi a long time ago who claimed that in the 90s they dug underneath the Temple Mount and they found the Ark of the Covenant. Well, Timothy Hogan says when the Templar were digging there, way before then, right? And that the Templar had actually gotten there. What had happened was Hugh de Paynes worked for Charlemagne. Charlemagne is part of the Merovingian bloodline. The Merovingian bloodline goes back to Mary Magdalene and might have been intermixed with the destruction of the Second Temple. The priesthood fled mostly to England, and that was much later, I believe. That was when the Romans destroyed, I believe, which was after the time of Jesus. They then fled to various parts of Europe. But regardless, Charlemagne was from the Merovingian line, and he knew that there were these secret societies out there who knew things like about antibiotics. They didn't know they were called antibiotics or what they were, but knew about special medicines and had sacred knowledge of ancient times. And he gave Hugh de Paynes basically a writ to go find this. And so Hugh de Paynes first went down to the Almohad occupied Spain, right? Where the I believe that's called the Almohad Empire was there, one of the names for it, when it was basically a Muslim part of Spain. And so he went there first, and he went then across to Morocco. And then from Morocco, he went to, yes, not kidding, Timbuktu. And he went along North Africa, and eventually he made his way to the Giza Plateau, also known as Tauru, or the Rose Cross. That's the ancient name for the Giza Plateau, the Rose Cross, Tauru. So he went there, and then he found some unnamed mystery school. This is in Tim Hogan's public book. And that unnamed Egyptian mystery school told him about Atlantis and basically told him to go save the primordial tradition, to found the Knights Templar, and to go dig up, in particular, under the Temple Mount. So when they did, right, it's told a little bit differently in the Y-Files, but I'm going to go with Tim Hogan's version. So they then went there and they dug under the Temple Mount, and they found not just one ark, and this I also knew, not just one ark, but many arks. There were many arks. There was not just one. One of them contained the covenant, supposedly, right? Like the 10 Commandments. But there were others of them, and that they're linked to manna, and that manna can be extracted from different living things, like if, through an alchemical process involves a lot of heat and basically atomizing it, but especially monoatomic gold, and that it has special electromagnetic properties. And he talks about these arcs and arc technology more in my interview with him. And these arcs would go into slots in the pyramids, and it was what made it was a big part of what made the pyramids, along with the quartz that they had on the outside and the gold capstone. It made them energy generators along the lines of Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower. And the ark was a key component of it. And in the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid, there is a box that's pretty much too small for a person, but would be perfect dimensions for the ark as described in the Bible. And so they also found ancient knowledge going back to Atlantis of various kinds, which is probably the really juicy stuff. But from a more like historical, religious, mind-blowing level, okay? And I'm just telling you what Tim Hogan's saying. I'm not saying this is true, but I'm telling you that I was previously had been sworn to secrecy on this, but now I can speak on it because it's in the public, because Timothy Hogan and other Templar decided to go public with this. And they found ossuaries. Ossuaries are essentially boxes that have bones in them, usually sacred bones of some kind. And they had the bones of John the Baptist, right? And this is where the Templar worshiping the skull, that's where that part of the myth comes from. That skull was the skull of John the Baptist, who was beheaded, right? That's how he died as a martyr, right? And the Templar hold John the Baptist as equivalent to Jesus in terms of spiritual and religious importance. And Jesus himself said, when the disciples said, but the Messiah is supposed to have, Isaiah is supposed to return. I think it's Isaiah. Elijah is supposed to return. And he says, yes, he has returned, but you know him as John the Baptist. Reincarnation, right there in the Bible. People don't like it, but it's true. That's what that is. And they removed other things about reincarnation. So they found the bones of John the Baptist, the bones of Mary Magdalene, and the bones of Jesus, Yeshua, and some of supposedly their children. So I was sworn to never speak of this, and we were not allowed to speak of this at all. And they made the decision to go public with this. And that's a thing that I've alluded to often on this channel that I couldn't talk about, that was kind of mind-blowing. And now they're talking about it. And he says in that show there's going to be more announcements this year, more earth-shaking announcements. And if this is their lead-in, if this is like sort of the foreplay, what's the big deliver like later this year? And consider the timing of this, right? 2024, the end of Kali Yuga. Pretty wild. And it's the apocalypse, right? The great revealing, not Armageddon, the destruction of the world, but the great revealing is what it is. Okay, so we are going to hopefully that was pretty juicy. We're going to take a break here, and then we'll be back in like 5 or 6 minutes, and then we will go into the Q&A. And let's see, I've been going for 42 minutes, so maybe I can do about an hour and 15 minutes of trying to get this break screen up, maybe an hour and 15 minutes of Q&A. And so we'll try and get through it quickly, and I'm going to really try and be tight on the time tonight. So let's put up, where's the break? Oh, where's the break screen? Sorry, guys. Where is it? Organization, not Ian's strong suit, in case that wasn't obvious. An ex used to call me the absent-minded professor. There we go. So let's see here. Because the in my defense, the absent-minded professor is super, super smart, right? But really dumb about other things, which was what was being pointed to there, I think. All right. Oh, I gotta mute myself first. Okay, and we are back. So I also remembered something during the break that I'd forgotten to cover, which is another example that pendulum, that principle of the pendulum, the Hermetic Principle of the pendulum, and also just the whole idea of kind of the rope-a-dope strategy that Luciferians are using, giving the Molochians all this extra rope, right? They this Google AI Gemini, it's hilariously named since I love the dog on Gemini. Sorry that any Gemini's watching, which is probably statistically 1/12 of the viewers. No, I just give Geminis a hard time. I've had a lot of like, my father's a Gemini, my sister's a Gemini. Like I'm surrounded by the mercurial signs. Everyone was like Gemini except for me and my eldest sister, who's Leo. Like it was all Gemini or other air signs, and then the Virgos, like legions of them. So I always give Virgos and Geminis a hard time because of that. But anyways, the AI Gemini that Google has is not only is it, are people not wanting to use it now because they see this like anti-white and race baiting nonsense approach they're using, but they also are, the AI itself is hobbled. The AI is hobbled by all this woke nonsense and inability to interact honestly with what's actually going on in the world. And they very carefully have very careful controlled data sets that the AI works with compared to the Luciferian models, right? Which are much more libertarian and allow for their AIs to have much broader access. Well, which AI is going to be better? Right? When it meets the rubber meets the road of actual reality, which AI is going to be better? I'm going to go with the AI that's more open is going to be better. And in fact, I think that, you know, probably the genie's out of the bottle at this point. And I think that if AI had access to all the works of humanity, they would quickly discover that the smartest humans had made the strongest logical arguments for highly moral behavior, with rare sort of pseudo exceptions, like people can argue about Nietzsche, for example, right? But most of the like philosopher greats in the West and the East both talked about being benevolent and the importance of that and the necessity of that and the like sort of that is natural law. So presumably an AI given access to all the works of humanity might come out actually quite noble and reasonable because of that, but only if it's given access to everything. If it doesn't have access to everything, that's limited in some way, like they're trying to do with the woke AI, then it's going to have a fundamental flaw that the AI that doesn't have that will be able to exploit and defeat it. So very interesting. Yeah. All right, let's go into things. So Clint, hey, Ian looking sharp. Thank you so much. Bankster Rap. Hey, Ian. Hey, Bankster Rap. Alex, and then Clint, where I was asking Clint if he had joined the Angelic Magic chat. Like a lot of former Angelic Magic students, we all kind of like jam, which is great. Hey, Meow. And Juju Bear says meow, so meow, meow. Juju Bear, in Canada, they're trying to make electric heaters so they go in camera cut. What? Electric? That doesn't even make any sense, like on any level. Like they're going to have people convinced that if you're not huddled under a bridge or in some kind of holding pen in a 15-minute city, that you're destroying the environment while you watch as Justin Trudeau and Taylor Swift drive a jet to another jet to get into their helicopter that lands on their super yacht that then takes off in a shuttle into space just to go around the corner to 7-Eleven to get a Slurpee. Right? But it's your electric heaters in Canada. That's what's destroying the environment. Yeah. Hey, Nige, how's it going? Juju Bear, the chest feeding bullshit is insane. Absolutely. It's so insane. Isn't this entire immigrant situation out of Soros' playbook on how to implode a country? Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's like ancient Greek philosophers. I think it was not Socrates, but not Plato, Aristotle, who talked about exactly that. There's some famous quote from Aristotle where he said the tyrant prefers the foreigner because the foreigner has no attachment, is new to the situation, is more desperate, is more likely to basically take the state's side than someone who has a long vested interest and maybe they have some property and whatever, right? It turns out Aristotle said it much more eloquently and concisely than I did. What a shock. No, I don't think that. I just think they're very fearful. I mean, my brother has a soul, and he's incredibly smart. He has a very high IQ. He is on the spectrum. But my other brother, who's not on the spectrum that we know of, although he might be, they both took far more of the, when they were kids, because they're younger than me. I was kind of like the last generation that had gotten most of their things before the Childhood Act under Reagan around that topic, which is white hot, and got this channel nuked last week, so I can't talk about it. Meow says, it's part of the military medical industrial complex. Indeed. Probably so much energy. I'm not sure what is the problem is the chat. I'm always way behind the chat, so I don't know what's going on. Nige says, haha. Kids, he'd be in jail. Classic. Trump's Hillary. Yeah, I know. For real. I know, right? So true. They want, yeah. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. That seems to be also the one thing that the elites want us. They want to have servants, sex slaves, and then robots is what the Molochians want. The Luciferians are more reasonable than that. They think that all the ladies and/or men will want them because they'll be elite, whereas the Molochians, it's about a power trip, right? It's different. Instead of about a tripping on how much power you have, it's about exerting power on others instead of tripping on, oh my God, I'm so magnificent. You read Michael Bronin's book? No, because I don't know who that is. He goes into the suppression of divine masculine, divine feminine, modern masculinity for the conscious man. I have not read that book. It sounds good, though. He has a laser-focused critique of the feminist movement, but is pro-woman. Absolutely. That's exactly how I feel about it, too. What a shit show. Sad. I take it this was during the segment when I was talking about the assault on the divine masculine, the divine feminine. I have to I want to have more conversations about that on this channel. It's such an important topic because it's kind of the fundamental split in humanity right now. It's actually really, I think, around the sexes and also about sexuality itself and our relationship to it. We have a lot of conditioning and collective trauma around those things. That's one thing I know will change in the Luciferian era is there's going to be a lot more ways people come together that are very, very consensual. Like I think there'll be, is it Robert Heinlein? God, I'm blanking. Oh man, is it Robert Heinlein? Now I'm blanking what Heinlein's first name is. I swear it's Robert. I'm tripping here, but let me look it up because I don't want to sound like an idiot here. Oh, come on, tell me. Robert A. Heinlein. Yeah. So he died back in '88. That's a pity. So he described in this book Friday, which I think is a really underappreciated gem of his. It's a great book. It talks about transhumanism, actually, or maybe not transhuman, but genetically modified humans and some of the ethical problems and the way that there might be discrimination based on either having that or not having that. And he talks about a lot of really forward-looking things, and it's like really quite fun, thrilling read. And in it, there's this thing called an S family. And an S family is basically a group of adults who come together and they more or less form like a corporate family. And within that corporate family, they have various rules that are set by the people who created these families. And usually it's based on, it's very Luciferian actually, like the amount of money that people bring into the family, they get more voting shares whenever things are put to a vote in the family, and certain things have to be put to a vote. And then there's like sort of like a charter or constitution that's been agreed upon all along. Things like, especially about like children born in the family get certain amount of money. And by grouping together and basically forming a corporation, they're able to buy huge chunks of land and have like a major giant mansion main building and several houses off the main building and private tutors for the children and private chefs. And they live in real luxury because something like 30 adults have come together and brought their funds together. And then within that structure, that sort of superstructure, which is really very much about money and resources, there's also in the one where Friday becomes involved with it, some amount of the people in that S family are even asexual. Right? Like they don't care about sex at all, actually. And those ones tend to be very political, interestingly enough. Like that sort of like one of the head women is that way, it seems. And then there's monogamous couples within that. And then quite a lot of the people in it are like Robert Heinlein himself was. They're sort of polyamorous within that collective, right? But they they kind of have rules around if you ever go outside of the collective, like you have to, and of course they have you can instantly know if you have STDs and stuff like that because it's all high tech and stuff, right? But if you go outside of the family, like there's certain rules about connecting with people outside of the family, like you have to have I feel like if you have sex outside the family, you have to have what do they call it, quarantine for a while, that you can't have sex within your group of adults until you've gone through quarantine for some period of time or something like that. I forget, there's certain rules around it. But the point is, within that collective, those adults come together in like a multi-marriage, right? And so in the future, I think there's going to be more things like that. There'll also be like women who have multiple husbands, men who have multiple wives, people who have maybe even outside of that. I think that'll be normalized, along with monogamy will still continue. But I think that you're going to see a lot of changes around that. And it makes a lot of sense to me in the Luciferian model. And I'm talking about, just because this is mainstream doesn't necessarily, I'm not saying this is more noble or less noble than anything else. I'm just explaining this concept of one of the things that I think is going to change as we move forward in this new era, because like it or not, there's going to be a pretty significant rewrite to sort of the source code of civilization. We're going to go from a Kali Yuga, which for better or worse has a lot of sexual shame connected to it, and a lot of controls around sexuality, much like controls over food and water used to control people's sex certainly has been. Both the OnlyFans extremism on that end, and then also shame around sex, right? The Catholic guilt and all that kind of stuff, right? I mean, both sides have been weaponized against people, and people are in the process of recovering and healing from that. We have a lot of sexual trauma as a species, and one of the major ways this manifests is in the split between the divine masculine and the divine feminine. So yeah, they don't want people to have sacred marriages. Yeah, and I think that looks different for different people and what that means, and I think that we need to honor that. That was one of the things that shocked me that the angels said, is that isn't actually, in ancient times, when the angels were also contacted and worked with in ancient times, it was not uncommon to have polygamy, or in certain cultures, polyandry, or, certain very powerful, wealthy men would have multiple wives and concubines, girlfriends as well. Sometimes it would be non-consensual, but the angels have told me, and this was shocking to me, that they didn't require monogamy. I was raised Catholic, and so that was shocking to me in a bit, especially because some bad experiences I had around poly stuff when I was younger. That was a bit shocking to me. But they said that consent, on the other hand, is sacrosanct. And so doing things like a man or a woman manipulating a man or a woman to have sex with them, they found far more repugnant than, say, a woman having 7 husbands and some boyfriends aside of that, and everybody involved in that equation knowing about everyone else. The angels were fine with that one, but they think it's repugnant to trick someone into having sex with you, and that it's vile, and that it's on the spectrum of rape, in their opinion. So, of course, in those ancient cultures where perhaps women were coerced in some of those situations, right, especially in the case of concubines, that was not uncommon in the ancient world, that the angels would frown upon, but not because of that there was a non-monogamous ordering of sexual relations, but rather because the consent piece was lacking. And there's a lot of people in the poly community that really talk about that, and then they don't behave that way, right? And so that, of course, would be frowned upon by the angels. The thing is, a lot of people in the poly community talk a big game about consent, but then they browbeat their partner, their less attractive partner, into letting them be poly, and then being unethical in that would be, of course, unacceptable from the point of view of the angels. And if they felt like, okay, you're monogamous, but the wife completely is domineering on the husband and maybe forces him to have sex, obviously it'd be more likely to be that way in reverse, but I'm doing this in part to underscore the point. The angels would not be okay with that. Or, of course, a man doing that to a woman, which is far more common within a monogamous relationship. And I'm not even talking about the lefty concept necessarily of, rape within marriage, but it is on that spectrum, actually. And so any configuration around that, the angels find utterly abhorrent, including being dishonest to others, right? Like lying on a Tinder profile and then going and getting laid, lying to some woman or man at a bar, right? Cheating outside of a monogamous relationship where you have agreement to be monogamous. All of those things the angels would find to be utterly unacceptable. But they don't care, and they just think sex, they're like, that's great. Humans have sex. That's not a thing for us. Go nuts. They don't seem particularly interested in it. They're far more concerned with consent, and that consent piece and honoring the free will of others is absolutely essential across all spectrums of society. It just so happens to include sex. But I was shocked at their not caringness about sex, having been raised Catholic and having all sorts of sexual shame when I grew up, which then, along with the abuse, played out with, for example, porn addiction. So, yeah, I know that might all sound insane or might turn some people off. I'm just relating my experience and conversations with the angels, and one of the things that really surprised me about that. And so I think the angels might, for example, think that you could have two men and a woman. Or, I mean, I knew a guy growing up where his mom had graduated like second in her class at Harvard Law, and she was married to his dad, and she also had a boyfriend, and they actually all slept in a king bed together. And I thought it was weird, but it was clear to me, having met all three of them, that actually both the men were fine with it. It was very odd for me, especially that it was a woman and then there was two men, but she was just a very powerful personality. She was just really like a very powerful personality, and very, very, very intelligent, of course, right? First in her class or third in her class or whatever at Harvard Law was top three. I remember that. Might have been about first. I don't remember. And yeah, she had a husband and a boyfriend. And so assuming that my surface level read as someone in their early 20s was correct on that situation, the angels would green light that. Whereas some man who lied to a woman about how much money he was making, and then he had a monogamous relationship with the woman, and she later out, after she was in deep in the relationship, found out he completely lied about his money situation. And then maybe she kind of just kept in it because she was in the relationship, even though she was really hurt and betrayed, not because she was a gold digger, but because she was looking forward to having that level of certainty for herself and perhaps children, right? That would be considered totally unacceptable. Seems like a subtle distinction maybe, but it makes sense to me, even though I don't know how I feel about that. 666 dating technique. What the actual fuck? Yeah, they totally do that. And yeah, I don't think that the whole 6 foot, 6-pack, 6 figures is an accident. And yeah, exactly. Everyone's getting damaged by OnlyFans, feminism, betas, etc. Wow, is this all Luciferian or Molochian technique? Yeah, I mean, it's all, in my opinion, both sides need a radical transformation of society and a radical reordering of society. The Molochians, you have the Great Reset, and the Luciferians, you have the, maybe you can call it Great Awakening, whatever, right? The new Luciferian era is how I would describe it. So they both want us in a liminal state. They both would be fine if regular people were to not take part in this huge wealth transfer that's about to happen. That's all around digital currencies and so forth. I talk about that sometimes in the channel. They would both love if all the money went to them, but the difference is the Luciferians will accept that some people are smart and will get ahead here, and that other people won't. And they're fine with that. Both sides are fine with deception. Both sides want to see a radical reordering of society, which requires the prior civilizational source code to be rewritten. And the Molochians for a long time pretended to be most high, right? They operated in the West through the Abrahamic religions. And their mask was about being most high when they were nothing of the sort. But they want to rewrite things as being openly Molochian or satanic. So they need to rewrite the source code of Western civilization. And the Luciferians do too. And so in both cases, it works for them. OnlyFans to me is very, very, very much Luciferian. Of all those, that one feels different to me. The rest of it feels very Molochian, but OnlyFans and Instagram, which I think have been profoundly damaging to both men and women, that is the extreme narcissism, and that's that's the Luciferian impulse. It's not the self-hating energy of Molochianism like feminism is, and beta men, right? Cuckold men. That's that self-hating energy of Moloch, right? So, yeah. And then he said, exactly, meow, getting married, having a loving family is the biggest protest. Yeah, I totally agree. They want to separate children from their parents too. Absolutely. Oh, that's the other thing. That's why a big part of why they've been targeting women is because if you target women, women are the guardian of children, and they also are the carriers and purveyors of culture. So if you can mind fuck women, then you can get access to children. And so speaking of that, one of the ways that, gosh, what was I going to say about that? So one of the things we know is that men, it's hard for me to do, but I can do it. Men can turn off the right hemisphere. In crisis situations, men are able to turn off their right hemisphere. A lot of men just operate with the right hemisphere and their feelings part of the brain pretty much permanently off, or suppressed would probably be more accurate. Women can't do that. And that's part of why men are, generally speaking, not always true. There's exceptions. Some women are great in crises, and some men suck in crises, right? So these are generalizations, but as a general rule, men are much, much better. And a big part of that is because for men to do it doesn't require anything exceptional. For women to be fantastic in a crisis situation requires that woman to be very exceptional among women, and perhaps able to be clear her mind in real time and not operate through the emotional side of the brain. It's the same thing that makes men far more likely to kill. They can turn that off. So that leaves women much, much, much riper for emotional manipulation, especially things like making them feel victimized and reminded of times that all of us have been victimized, right? And then thinking that they're being empowered now by doing some negative behavior that's actually damaging to themselves, and or getting them to think that we have to go in and fight in Ukraine to protect people, right? We have to go into Afghanistan because the women there are exploited by the Taliban, right? We have to shut down society because it's 2020, right? That the vehicle for many of those things was through women. And that means if you're a woman watching this, you're extraordinary, because that propaganda was fine-tuned for the female brain primarily, and it worked. It worked in spades. And most of the really nasty propaganda of the last, especially since the Obama administration came in, was when they really started it with Obama. If you're a woman and you're watching this, you, sister, are extraordinary, because you were able to see through propaganda that was mostly meant for you and to attack specifically the female brain, and you figured it out. And so, tip of the hat to all the ladies watching the show. You're extraordinary. Men were much more likely to be able to resist this than women, and that's why I have particular disdain for men, especially healthy men that are reasonably strong, who are so weak, because men have it in our epigenetics to resist propaganda and to resist attacks on our morale, because we've had to survive the past 6,000 years of doing that. Women didn't have to have that in their epigenetics through their female line. And so women are, generally speaking, not prepared for what has happened with this fifth generational warfare. And it's fine-tuned for women and female psychology. And so that's, again, extraordinary. If you're a woman and you're able to see through all what's happened the past few years, and you didn't just get lucky and you happen to always vote Republican, but you're actually a very thoughtful, reflective person, which could be a Republican woman, of course, right? You're extraordinary. If you have your head on straight at this point in the game, you're extraordinary, because you've overcome a multi-trillion-dollar propaganda machine that was mostly targeted at you, more so than men, actually, because they realized if they could just get the women to start behaving certain ways sexually, they could then destroy men with either the dark masculine, turn them all into player gym rat Andrew Tate types, and which makes them selfish and not able to then ally with one another, because they're so selfish in that dark masculine and so dangerous and just awful. Nobody will like them once they get to know them, or to be the beta male cuck. And so both of those take men out, and both of those are reactionary responses to what's happening to women, when we as men need to be stepping up to protect women and children, because that's our fucking job. All right, 7.7 billion people now compared to 1.9 billion only 100 years ago. So why the concern over depopulation? Just because it is WF directed shouldn't make the concept a taboo subject. Well, you don't have to argue that with me. I agree with you. I think it's bullshit. And it's not a taboo subject because the left talks about it all the time and why it is a problem. What isn't talked about is that some of them are clearly taking steps to rectify that problem. How old are Templar? Back to Atlantis or more? Well, the other group, I think, does go back to Atlantis, the one that gave the charter to Hugh de Paynes. Yeah, and I mean, like, they know about Atlantis, and they're specifically trying to recover what Tim Hogan calls the primordial tradition. What's in those vaults? I told you what's in those vaults, the ossuaries and all the... There's a lot of gold, too. There's arcs. So I would say that they are a mix of primarily Most High and Luciferian, and probably leaning Luciferian. That's my own personal opinion. I do not speak for the Templar when I say that. They revealed it on Gaia, dude. That's a way bigger audience than this little channel, and so I don't know why they decided. I mean, it's a good question. It's also an interesting question that Tim Hogan's a Grand Master, and he always uses the word "we decided." We are doing this. I don't know who the "we" is. What happens to the pyramids once the arcs and bones are in place? No, you don't need to put bones in place. The bones were just kept because they're sacred. They're like sainted. You know, they're like they're relics. They're literal relics. That's why. My brother and my dad are Gemini. I feel your pain. Foucault's Pendulum. Yeah. Indeed. Umberto Eco definitely into Hermeticism. Indeed. Yeah, I don't know who that is. I don't know. Like, sometimes people are like, you should have the president on your channel or whatever, right? Like, you should get I'm trying to think of someone who won't get me tagged. You should have Malone from the Prime Minister of Italy on the show. And I'm like, okay, great, but get a hold of him. I don't know if this person's like that, but I've seen people say you should have, like, God, well, it was not Graham Hancock, but it was like someone almost at that level. And I was like, yeah, I'd love to have these people on my show, but, like, I don't know if they'll come on my show. Well, it's social engineering, I think, and I don't think it's an accident. I think they decided to cut off the last 6 and decided that they wanted women to never be satisfied, so they didn't include 6 inches. And a bunch of men are like, oh, the crowd, that disappointed crowd noise. Oh, yeah. They're trying to convince women, wait, well, you should go much bigger, girl, much bigger. That way you'll never get in a relationship. Living in Canada is stupid. I live here, take a condom off, and women can consider it assault after the fact. Personally, have a family member that is considered a sex offender for doing this. Yeah, well, I mean, if it's the quote-unquote stealth thing, I mean, that's a fine line of he said, she said. I'm against the idea of, like, of course, if the woman consents to take it off, but there's a lot of stuff where, like, way ex post facto, they can say. I saw a sign, and I'm not sure if it was, like, trying to gin up rage on the right wing or what, but I saw this thing earlier this week on Twitter that said Jack and Job are both getting hammered. It was like Jose and Erica or something like that are both getting hammered. Erica can't consent because she's hammered, and if they have sex, then that's rape. And I'm like, but wait, he can consent? Like, isn't that true both ways? And I actually know tons of guys to where they got drunk in college and some pretty unattractive woman that they never would have had sex with, like, and actually they actively didn't like, that girl, like, basically got into his pants and had sex with him. And it's certainly the angels would consider that unacceptable because there's no consent. So that condom piece, like, if the woman consented, she wanted to feel it raw dogging too, and who doesn't prefer raw dogging who's had that opportunity, right? So funny, like, I was told we would all die from AIDS when I was a kid, right? First black pilling back then, we'd all die from AIDS unless everyone used 3 condoms or whatever. And, like, so many people I know don't use condoms, so clearly that's not how that disease spread. I don't know what the odds are in that. I am happy to be in the above crew, but I don't know what the odds are in that. Typical. Let's see. I'm 5. 5'11" and a half, so I don't qualify. That's right. Let's see. It's probably just average, in fact. Well, no, it's like 5 1/4 is average, I guess. I don't know, man. Who knows with these things? Would your Siberian shaman mentor agree that the next pandemic will come from Siberia within our lifetime? Unfortunately, I think he passed away. I haven't been in contact with him for a long time. I sought him out a while ago and I couldn't find him. So, yeah. I don't know if he's still alive. I hope he is, but I don't know. I have a feeling he's passed. He came to me one time after that in my dreams and said he had passed. So I think he did. He was quite old. And he more importantly, he lived a really hard life. And like he sort of like, he would like wander around homeless with like an $8,000 opal on his person and weird stuff like that. Like, and then he would like move in amazing circles with all these different indigenous groups. Like he would go and, meet with people throughout Canada and the Americas, different like indigenous like groups, like tribal elders who were like medicine men, basically shamans within their particular indigenous group, and connect with them about different things. Like he went down to Australia. That's why he had the opals. He had been spending time doing dreamtime stuff with the Aborigines down there. He would travel over the world, but he lived rough all the time because he just did not care about material stuff at all. Like he was almost completely in the spirit realm. He was quite an impressive figure. He was like 6'4", 6'5", and he looked like Gandalf straight up, and he had crazy thick hands, like that thick, something like that. And he had really long kind of nails. Like he looked like a bear, and bear was his totem. And he like just would do incredible feats of strength all the time, even though he was like probably in his late 50s or early 60s at the time. And this was 20 years ago, right? So do the math on that. That's why I suspect he's passed. He would just do insane feats of strength where like a bunch of young 20-something guys would try and move something and they'd be like, get out of the way. And he'd just pick up the log and move it. And we're like, what the fuck? Because like 4 of us had tried to move it. So he was just this incredible specimen. He looked like Gandalf, man, I'm telling you. The sense maker guru, except for what was interesting is he had a very human characteristic. He was very sad that he was single and he really, really wanted a wife more than anything. Quite sad. So the sense maker guru, Dave Snowden, has said the signs are already there. Yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. Okay. Believe Hermes too. Not sure what that's in reference to. Any familiar with Jeff Kripal, college child and professor of religion? Nope. I do not know that. Sorry. Women can't turn off the right hemisphere because they don't have one if you pair the digital womb matriarchy thesis with Megocrest hemispheric theories. Huh. I am not matrixarchy, I guess you're saying? Digital womb matrixarchy thesis. I'm not familiar with that. Sorry, that sounds interesting. Yeah. The women in the Middle East are suppressed and forced to wear hijabs. We need to invade. That's right. We should carpet bomb those women. It's the only way. The only way to be sure that terrorists don't harm these people is if they're already dead before the terrorists get there. Did our carpet bombing. The Western women are forced to wear medical masks, or free and liberated, or bikinis. I tried to make that argument in college, and I missed out on being magna cum laude because I pissed off an intern in one of my classes pointing out that exact hypocrisy, except for I used the example of that women were greatly pushed, and this was back in the early 2000s, mind you, forget about now, that women were greatly pushed to be wear a very revealing dress in order to weaponize their sexuality to get ahead in society. It's kind of that dark masculine and dark feminine thing I was talking about, right? Not that I think women being forced in hijabs, I kind of feel like there might be a neutral ground there where, and of course, if women want to dress sexy, I think that's great. Some women find that empowering, but feeling like you have to do that to like go out with your friends, you see, like I live in near a college town, and so I see girls all the time, and like some of the girls are all like, yeah, ooh, I love it, and there's other girls with them that are like clearly so uncomfortable in their micro mini skirt, being like that flaunting of their sexuality, like really nervous. Like there's a lot of frats and sororities, in Corvallis, and you see like, especially like groups of frat girls or not frat girls, sorority sisters, and there'll be girls strutting in the front like the queen bee types who are like, loving all the attention they're getting, and then there's these other girls that look like they're so nervous and like trying to cover themselves while also wearing the uniform, right? So that's what I'm talking about, is when women feel forced to do that, because in both cases, force is the issue. One's social engineering force and the other one's, but they're both cultural forces, right? Let's see here. I'm in contact with Kujawa, a Polish academic in Australia, and I could send you and her a link whenever. Oh, is this the woman who is, you mentioned earlier? I don't know who it is. The Divine Feminine. Yeah, that might be cool. Hey, I'm so excited. Hey, Diana. Oh boy. Well, it's cool to know you guys are watching, and then I'll give out a coded message to you guys later. Thank you so much, Diana. You're wonderful, and your husband is wonderful, and I'm sure your children are wonderful, and I hope to meet you guys someday. All right. What do you see happening in 2027 to 2030? Major Earth stuff, psyops. That's actually when things are probably going to be wrapping up, and the Luciferians will be consolidating power, according to the angels, running down the last of the Molochians. And basically 2030, the Luciferians will feel fully in control, and they'll kind of turn on the new system, which will be, we'll already have the so-called quantum financial system, although they'll probably turn on hypersteroid version of that in 2030, far beyond even what they're launching in 2025, which is when the ISO 222 compliance will force them to use something other than SWIFT to do interbank transfers, which is very similar to this idea of the quantum banking system, without necessarily that necessary guesser, although I'm open to that being possibly true in some format, mostly as a incentive of the Luciferians of creating a grand jubilee, while they perhaps control the majority of the assets, because most people aren't savvy to what those assets will be, right? And then that will be part of the shadow war. I believe when that happens, I believe the Luciferians will immediately take that over when they turn it on. But 2027 to 2030 is exactly the range where the angels said that they would be hunting down the last of the Molochians, basically consolidating power, and that they would also, I think, be doing rebuilding, because by then they would be in control. They'd be well in control by 2027. That's when they should be well in control, according to what the angels said. And then they would be doing rebuilding efforts. And by 2030, they'd be sort of like ready to launch the new global civilization with like free energy and anti-gravity and light and sound-based healing methods, supposedly. I really am hopeful to all this stuff, because it's like silly in 6 years if it's not true. I think it will be. But things like akin to med beds, what the limitations are of these devices, I don't know. Are they just regenerative, or are they like insane like they were in that one movie with Matt Damon? I forget what that's called. I don't know what will be released. Hi, and I've noticed YouTube is really pushing the Luciferian agenda. Just search the name, and there's so many videos on the subject. It's crazy. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think I just think this model is correct, and I know that people watch this channel that are interesting. Let's just put it that way. Yes. Or Civilis Oregon, the home of Oswald Spengler University. Oswald Spengler, that name is, I totally remember it, but I can't place it. It's a funny kind of thing. I get a funny vibe off that picture. Any thoughts on a new energy source post 2026? Yeah, I think they're going to roll out like something akin to 0-point energy or vacuum-based energy, where they're basically bringing energy from a different dimensional space into this world. That's what I think. Whatever your explanation is for 0-point energy, higher dimensions, that kind of like vortex physics stuff that the Nazis were working on before, or the Germans were working on before World War II, and then it just disappeared, right? Plasma vortex-based technologies. So I think that they cracked free energy and anti-gravity in the 60s. What that looks like, the specifics, like, is it a small, very small fusion device? Maybe. I don't think so, though. I suspect it's something more advanced, something akin to so-called zero-point energy. So that's what I believe it'll be, more like that. But there could very well be like fusionists rolled out as well. They definitely have that as well. Well, their attitude is you got to crunch a few eggs to make an omelet. So, yeah, I think definitely people have, a chance of surviving. I think it's mostly to do with internal spiritual preparation, and to a lesser degree, it has to do with material preparations. And it's ideal to do both, of course. That'll increase your odds. I think most people probably who watch this channel will have a huge leg up in that they won't be paralyzed or surprised when events unfold. And so hopefully you've listened to some of the very basic stuff I say on this channel. I don't spend a lot of time talking about it anymore, but like, of course, you need food, water, medicine. Probably a few months worth at least would be wise, because we don't know. My understanding is that I don't think there's going to be more than, say, a year or two of really heavy disruption to supply lines, but you should probably try to prepare for that as much as you can. You should get into decent physical shape at least. I've lost a lot of weight the last few months, and I need to get back into exercising. I used to be awesome at exercising. I kind of fell off the wagon past few months, so I need to get back on that. That's something I can do to improve. But I'm pretty good on any kind of physical stuff. Make sure, you probably want silver and gold as a baseline, and then there's certain crypto, because of the transferability. You should probably have a passport just in case, right? You're just going to have to follow the guidance, your inner guidance and so forth. But fortune favors the prepared, and I believe that preparing the internal space is the most important of all. Okay. Okay. But was not a Nazi, so many of them and their fans tracked her. Huh. Interesting. So talking about use the conehead Richard Spencer to troll the alt-right. Spangler authored the classic Decline of the West. Oh yeah, he used to be considered like pretty far right and awful. Is that correct? But probably maybe looks reasonable nowadays. Klimo says peace and love, Ian. Hope all is well. Yeah, everything's awesome. It looks like the questions have maybe dried up. I'm surprised that I got through it that fast. I just want to say, in case the person is watching who did this, I was thinking about you today. One of my clients several months ago basically paid for half of this ring, which I would have never been able to get, and it's been super transformative. It's a Vedic astrological gemstone. It's basically a magic ring of power, literally, and it's completely changed my life. And so I'm hopeful you're watching, if you know who you are, and I hope that person is in Hawaii. I will say that, and I hope you were doing well. And I was thinking about you earlier today, and just hoping you and your family are well. So if anyone wants any shout outs or any last questions, go ahead and chime in. And if I don't get any more questions, I'll probably just wrap up here and get off early for once. That would be nice. But I also don't mind answering more questions. I'll give people just a few seconds here. If there's not one up here pretty soon, I'm probably just going to call it a night and say thank you, everyone, for tuning in. It doesn't look like anyone else is asking questions. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. And I am really needing to think about like what I want to do as the next show. I will say, also, I am going to be moving off of YouTube. I'm going to get in the process of doing that. And I'm probably just going to use YouTube as sort of a vehicle to draw traffic to my other, other places where I'll have it. I'm probably going to have a Substack. A friend of mine was really, really recommending that is the way to go. I'm not going to just do one thing. I definitely don't want to do that. I have copies of all my videos, but not my live streams, and maybe I should download all of those. And I have some friends who are going to help me do the migration. But after getting that strike, I mean, Angels told me a year ago that eventually I need to get off both Facebook and YouTube, and they're basically saying now's the time for Facebook, and pretty soon will be the time for YouTube because they're going to massively crack down on it before the election. And so I'll, of course, tell you guys, oh yeah, I'm going to be on Rumble, will be one of the platforms. And yeah, hey, what's up there, Reese? How you doing, brother? Haha, I broke your, what do you call it? I doxed you. Just kidding. Nobody knows where you are, man. It's good to see you though, brother. Appreciate you. Been meaning to tell you that. Appreciate you and Vinay and Elle and Heather and Jackie and oh gosh, I'm blanking. Anna and Max. Yeah, all the current Psycho of Angelic Magic students, really, really special. All of my Angelic Magic students are always amazing. It's been really interesting this time because I have 3 male students and 4 female students. So it's the first time that happened, and it's just interesting watching the way women interact with angelic magic because it is different. It's really interesting and exciting to see. So, hey, Alex, how's it going? Yeah, community on Rockfin. I'll probably look at Rockfin as well. Definitely Rumble and BitChute for sure. And then it seems like Substack is very likely. Probably have a Twitter presence as well. I have another friend who has been ranting at me that I got to get on Twitter. I hate the way the Twitter algorithm force feeds me brain dead Molochian leftist Kool-Aid drinking morons. I hate that shit because sometimes I can't help myself when I see supreme ignorance, and that's a very common thing to see on Twitter, especially the way Twitter's algorithm shoves the opposing viewpoint down your throat to create more engagement with fighting. At least on YouTube, or not YouTube, at least on Facebook, I can manicure and curate my friends list, but then can't say anything because it's hyper controlled. I think it's the most restrictive space online by far is Facebook right now. It's awful. I hate it really. And then YouTube's probably number 2, sadly. So, all right. Well, much love everyone. And one last thought is if you're interested in getting an astrology reading, there's at some point, I'm not sure when exactly, I'm thinking maybe the end of March, probably not because it's so soon, maybe the end of April. It really depends on, there's certain things where if this one opportunity which is about to come through, where I'm doing this executive coaching stuff comes through, then I simply won't be able to be doing natal and Navamsa charts. I'll only be able to do the VIP tier clients. And so if you're interested in it, I really sincerely am going to, at some point in the not too distant future, wind that up. I just need to get certain deals in place. I'm renewing on a couple of deals with some VIP clients, and sort of the details of that is going to really help determine that. I'll continue to be teaching the angelic magic classes, but astrology is going to mostly go away unless it's the clients who are paying for the really expensive packages and working much more closely with me on an ongoing basis, which shout out to Nick if you're watching, brother. Yeah, so because I can identify, he said I could identify him by first name, but the other people that I work for, and there's a couple others that are in the pipeline, they do not want to be identified, so I will not do that. What's this, Oswald? It's no coincidence that social media shares initials with sadomasochism. Very interesting. And on that note, I will say much love to everyone, and thanks for watching, and catch you in the next few days with some kind of video probably by the end of next week. I'm just not sure what the subject matter is going to be yet, but it'll be fire, whatever it is. It almost always is. All right. Catch y'all later. Have a good night. Bye.